listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, the Australian IVF medical bungle that is now making international headlines. It's been revealed a Brisbane woman was implanted with the wrong embryo and gave birth to a stranger's child. We chat with journalist Ameila Oberhardt, who has been investigating the fertility industry to find out how this could happen. Has this happened to others? And what it now means for a precious new baby and her parents caught up in this horrific medical disaster. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Friday, the 11th of April. Opposition leader Peter Dutton has broken his silence on the federal election campaign over reports he was the target of an alleged terror plot. The opposition leader saying politics is a brutal business.
It's a brutal business, there's no question about that. Currently my kids are safe, and so that puts it all into perspective.
A 16-year-old boy from Queensland who cannot be named faced court this week over allegations he planned to assassinate Mr Dutton last year with a drone and homemade bombs. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says he has reached out to Mr Dutton to discuss the alleged terror plot, revealing he has also been targeted with at least one incident before legal processes at the moment. Overseas and investigations are continuing after a horrifying helicopter crash in New York that killed 6 people. The chopper broke up mid-flight before slamming into the Hudson River. The last terrifying moments were caught on camera. A pilot and a family of 5 tourists died. The father was the head of a major Spanish tech company who was on the flight with his wife and 3 young children. Here is New York City Mayor Eric Adams.
All 6 victims have been removed from the water, and sadly, all 6 victims have been pronounced deceased.
There are reports the pilot made a mayday call just moments before the crash. And Aussie sprint sensation Gout Gout has broken the magical 10-second barrier for the 100 metre sprint in Perth at the Aussie Athletics Championships. He's become the 3rd Australian to run 100 metres in less than 10 seconds, and he did it twice within 2 hours.
I just focused on what I needed to focus on, got to my drive pace and kept powering through, and then saw the clock, so can't be happier than that.
But his times won't be entering the official record books because they were wind assisted. Now it's time to get into our deep dive on an IVF medical disaster here in Australia. It's been revealed today Monash IVF in Brisbane transferred an incorrect embryo into a patient, meaning she gave birth to a stranger's baby. The fertility clinic argues it was human error, but the serious mistake has now opened an entire moral and legal minefield, posing serious questions about how this happened and what measures are in place to protect patients and their precious babies. Journalist Ameila Oberhardt is the host of a new series on Listener investigating the fertility industry, which drops on Monday, and she joins us now. Ameila, thanks so much for joining us. This is such a distressing story because, as we know, there is a precious baby involved and a number of parents and people involved in this terrible medical bungle. Can you just unpack exactly what's happened here regarding Monash IVF in Brisbane?
Obviously, the story's coming through Monash, so the parents are not identified and haven't spoken out yet. But it appears that what has happened is Monash have implanted a mother of a couple with what they believe to be her embryo. It was mistakenly somebody else's embryo that was implanted into this mother. She gave birth here in Brisbane in December, and this mistake has been realised sometime in the last few weeks when they went to move their embryos that were remaining to a different provider, but there was an extra embryo that should not have been there. So that was how it was identified. They have said it was a human error, which you wonder in 2025 how human error could be at this gravity.
So, Ameila, in regards to this, I've got so many questions, as a lot of other people would. This was only discovered, this extraordinarily distressing mistake, because they asked for those embryos to be moved. Now, one may question, if they did not ask for that, would have this ever been discovered?
That's exactly right. And I mean, that plays into all the issues that are fraught with people that don't know their donor conceived and anonymous sperm donation and all of the other ways and burrows that this industry can take. But yes, saying that Monash never owned up to it, I mean, who knows how long it would have taken before this was realised, if ever.
So with this, to unpack it a little bit further, there is a woman who's been incorrectly implanted with somebody else's embryo, and she has then given birth to what she thought was her biological child, but now has been told it is another person's biological child.
That's correct. So it's almost accidental surrogacy. It's unfathomable. It's actually so shocking. You just can't imagine what those parents are going through at this point in time. Not only the emotional toll, physical toll that pregnancy and childbirth takes on someone, but to find out then it is not your biological child. And what happens to the child that's born from this? What ramifications for the other family? Do they already have a family? I mean, you can go down many a rabbit hole as to the problems that this is going to be fraught with.
Ameila, you have been in the centre of this incredible investigation that you've spearheaded into what you're seeing as the Wild West of the fertility industry. The series, which is available on Listener, will drop on Monday. One may say none of this surprises you. Would that be a correct reflection of what you've found through your investigation?
Yeah, as I've been saying to everyone that asked me about it, I started this looking at the fertility industry, trying to see it as a whole from multiple perspectives. Each facet, be it surrogacy, IVF, donation, sperm donation, egg donation, it took about 11 different twists and turns. It is so complex and it's a web, and you could just continue to fall down rabbit hole after rabbit hole into burrows and really get stuck on one thing. We wanted to give quite a measured view of the industry, but what we did find was, for a multi-billion-dollar industry, it was fraught with problems and it is deeply flawed. And I don't think that there's anybody that can suggest that it is not flawed. And that comes from a governing perspective. It comes from mistakes that are made within clinics. It comes from past mistakes some believe were made. Because there's no legislation that properly governs it, it is the Wild West and people are operating on the margins. And it's going to lead to some serious consequences, which we're seeing play out in real time.
Now, Monash IVF has come forward saying their processes were robust. I'm talking about this bungle that was exposed in Brisbane, saying, quote, "Everything is double-checked for the last 40 years. Every time we handle tissues, someone's got to sign off on us." But they have admitted that there is always the possibility of human error. Now, many of us, everyone knows somebody that is going through IVF because the heartbreaking journey of fertility issues is evident. All of us know someone going through it, and that's what is so awful about this story, what they're going through during the fertility process and then for this to happen. I've already been contacted by so many people I know today with this story saying, hang on, we've gone through IVF, should we be worried? Is that a genuine concern for couples for decades that have gone through IVF?
You can only imagine the amount of people running for DNA testing off the back of today. If you had the slightest doubt, the slightest anxiety, the people we interviewed, they were already anxious. You're putting, human life in someone else's hands. You've spent all this money, all this time to create a biological family or a family of your own. You finally get it. The seed of doubt that has now been planted, I just can't imagine what any parent would be going through right now with the questions that remain unanswered about this situation.
Ameila, we have to be really mindful about, as we've mentioned earlier in this specific case, as with all the others, there are precious babies involved. There are families that have gone through the heartbreaking journey of IVF. But this is also going to open up a legal minefield, surely.
There's many ways and twists and turns it can take. Obviously, the clinic itself could be up for millions of dollars in compensation to both families that are affected, whether or not the legalities of the child on the birth certificate, because usually when you're born in Australia, The parents are the birth parents, so people that give birth to you. So that is going to prove problematic. Whether or not that other family had a family of their own and they had not intended on using that embryo or had intended, I mean, the complications are huge. And I think because it's unprecedented, it will set, the tone for anything that happens going forward. This is the case, the landmark case, I guess, that it's going to be.
Also important to mention, Amelia, and you'd be very well aware of this, last year Monash IVF settled a class action with no admission of liability after claims it used inaccurate genetic testing and destroyed potentially viable embryos.
Well, we speak to two people in the podcast that have had similar issues with either genetic screening or lack thereof, which is, an extremely common theme we found throughout our interviews, that the clinics were really putting their faith in the trust of the person that was donating. There was a very limited checks and balances done to donors' medical histories and mental states and all those sorts of things. And on top of that, we have a mother. She is now a mother, but she was a cancer patient who was told her only chance at that point was to freeze embryos with a donor. And at that point, Queensland only had 9 donors. She was then informed that those embryos needed to be destroyed due to lack of medical testing, that they had an inherited disease, and she had no choice in that. So, I mean, this isn't the first time the industry has been questioned. It's just the first time it's really coming to light, because those 700 people that were involved in that case, they settled out of court.
Amelia, this is so distressing. And as I mentioned before, you've uncovered during your investigation with this podcast series, the Wild West of the fertility industry. What needs to happen? It's unregulated. The legislation obviously needs to be enforced properly. Through your investigation, what have you found that needs to happen to protect people involved in the IVF journey, these very, very vulnerable people and their precious babies?
The overarching theme that came from almost everybody we spoke to was the absolute fundamental need for a national governing body. Currently, healthcare sits on a state-by-state, territory-by-territory basis. There's over 30 different pieces of legislation. Whether or not the states choose to enact that, at the moment you can donate 10 times to a clinic in Coolangatta and cross the border and donate 10 times in the Tweed, because the federal government is not talking. The states are not talking to each other. And it's where the whole industry comes down when you can't have a register in which everybody that's donor conceived, everybody that's surrogate, everybody that is taking gametes and swapping human tissue can be registered centrally. That includes private donations that are done with no tracking. I mean, the risks are huge, none more than accidental incest, medical problems, having 700 or so siblings. I think that the greatest thing we saw was the lack of federal governance and how important it is that we all come together for this sake of the children that are born from this industry.
Amelia, we appreciate your time. Congratulations on this excellent work, and we really hope through your great work that urgent action is taken. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for your time.
That was Ameila Oberhardt, host of Secrets We Keep by Any Means, a new podcast series investigating the fertility industry, which will be available on the Listener app on Monday. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'll be back tomorrow with the weekend briefing, and on tomorrow's episode, Antoinette Lattouf is joined by actor Jameela Jamil.
People think that I've been offline for 6 months and I've been posting every day. And as soon as I post a picture of myself shaking my boobs at the camera, there I am at the top of everyone's feed. It's an attack on women. It's a war on women. Social media is a war on women.
You can follow us on our socials on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and also on TikTok and YouTube. You just need to search Listener Newsroom. That's spelled LISTNR. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company. Have a lovely weekend.